Today on the Time Out Podcast, we'd like to welcome Bangkok-based novelist Lawrence Osborne. Lawrence is the author of several acclaimed non-fiction works, including, of course, 2009's Bangkok Days. Since 2012, he's mostly focused on fiction, producing an impressive 7 novels and 1 short story collection. Mr. Osborne's unique brand of storytelling is now being adapted to the big and small screen, notably with this year's Netflix adaptation of Ballad of the Small Player, starring Colin Farrell. Lawrence, thanks for joining me here in the podcast lounge of Public House.
Thanks for having me.
Did I get anything wrong in that introduction?
Everything, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
We'll gloss over it.
Okay, great stuff. We're going to talk about the Netflix adaptation, but I'd like to start first with Bangkok. According to your online biography, you've lived a nomadic life. You've called London home, New York home. Your first book was based in Paris. What was the long and winding road that brought you to call Bangkok home?
Well, when I was living in New York, I ended up working for the New York Times magazine. And my brief when writing for them was to be writing about psychiatry in the developing world. And so they would be sending me all the time to rural China and Borneo and Malaysia to write about strange psychological syndromes emerging in these countries, which was a whole sort of subject that I didn't know much about. But I had written a book about autism before that, and I think that's why they hired me to do that. And so while I was doing this, they would often base me in Bangkok because it was cheaper for them to pay my rent here than to send me back and forth to New York on business class flights. So I ended up spending months and months at a time here purely for logistical reasons. I wasn't living here. I was just traveling to, if you needed to get to Kuching or somewhere, it's a cheap flight from Bangkok. If you needed to go to Myanmar, cheap flight from Bangkok. Vietnam, same. Bangkok is very geographically favorable. You can get anywhere in the region in 3 hours. And so that's why I started coming here, end of the 1990s, beginning of the 2000s. I had actually spent some time here earlier in the 90s in a completely different capacity. But this was the current stay, if you like, began with that. And so after a while, I thought, I didn't move here straight away. I was still living in New York and was committed to living in New York, actually. And then something changed around 2010, 11, something like that. I guess I just got older, and I got too old for New York. And the stress of living in New York just got too much. And so then my mother died, and I had to go back to London, deal with that. And funnily enough, while that was going on, Newsweek called me and asked me if I'd like to interview Pedro Almodovar, the Spanish film director. And I was kind of appalled that they would ask me that. But my sister was like, no, go to Madrid and hang out for a week. So I did. And when I was there, I got psychoanalyzed by Almodovar, who said to me, no, you should not go back to New York. You should go east. And I thought, I'd mentioned Bangkok, I liked living there and so on. He said, no, go there. So I took his advice, funnily enough. And originally, actually, I went to Istanbul for a year and a half to chill out. And then I realized that Istanbul wasn't really for me. And then while I was living in Istanbul, I did a trip to Cambodia to write about archaeology there for an American magazine, because that's one of my interests is Khmer archaeology, strangely enough. And I passed through Bangkok, and I suddenly realized how much I liked the city, and how different it was from Istanbul in very interesting ways. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I just stop here for a while? And the stars aligned because I was offered an apartment, the same apartment I'm in now, actually, by a friend of a friend, Thai friend. And I walked into that apartment and I thought, this is the perfect place to do nothing, to disconnect, and to write books. And all that time in New York, I've been doing all this journalism and whatnot, and a huge social life there. And it was too much. It was getting, I wasn't able to really be alone and concentrate. And I thought, I'll stay here and I'll write a book a year for the next decade. And that's exactly what I did. So it was the best thing I ever decided to do.
If you look at your back catalogue, the books that you wrote before moving here are almost all non-fiction.
Exactly.
And you really become a novelist when you live in Bangkok. How do you think Bangkok has enabled that sort of metamorphosis from doing journalism and non-fiction and what you call anti-travel writing to writing fiction?
That's a very interesting question. I ask myself that all the time, but it's exactly correct. In a way, I owe the city a huge debt because it made me into a fiction writer, which I always wanted to be, well into middle age without being able to do it. I mean, I had written The Forgiven, my novel set in Morocco. I wrote that in New York for the most part, but I finished it here. And I think it's a number of things. I think when you live in a country where your language is not spoken, so that you're not surrounded by your own language all the time, it sharpens your sense of that language. I think Joyce says something like that about living in Trieste as an English speaker, or anywhere in Paris for that matter, that you actually become more aware of your language the less you speak it. And when I first came here, I wasn't speaking English really much. I had to learn Thai because, I didn't know anybody here, really. A couple of people from New York, but I didn't, in day-to-day life, I had to just deal with it. So I went in the deep end. And I found myself really cut off from English, which was the best thing, because the more you're cut off from your language, the more you focus on it and the more aware you become of. And I think that's what fiction is all about. It's all about language in a way that journalism is not. If you think about how you use language in journalism, as a journalist, you're using it instrumentally. If you write something beautiful in a journalistic piece, guess what? Your editor will just simply flatten it out because it's too flowery, it's too introspective, it's too artistic. And I found that writing for years and years and years, even with the New Yorker, I did a big piece for them about Papua New Guinea, which I was very proud of in the way I wrote it, and they just rewrote it. They might as well have a software program called Rewrite, and this flattens out your interior language and makes you unable to make the switch. And that's why journalists find it very hard to write fiction. They all want to write fiction for that reason, and they can't until they sever the umbilical cord. You have to stop doing it. And when you stop doing journalism, your linguistic brain switches channel, and it goes into a different imaginative dimension. Mm-hmm. And you need to cut off. And this is why I came to Bangkok, was to cut off. Mm-hmm. And hey presto, within 6 months, I found that my linguistic brain had totally changed.
Do you feel as well that you cut off from sort of the literati or the literary scenes that are sort of based in London or New York? And how do you feel? How do you relate to the sort of the book industry and the people that cluster in these cities?
I definitely didn't want to spend my life going to dinner parties and living in rooms. For myself, I wanted to get around. Hemingway once said, you need to buzz about. You need to go out and find out what's going on in the world, which means you need to go out and live and not just, be in these echo chambers. Now, obviously, I know the literary world in New York and London really, really well, and Paris too, actually, for that matter. I know those people. I know I grew up with it, actually. So it was background noise for me. Having been immersed in it all my life, I didn't feel the need to sort of get access to it or go into it. It just simply didn't matter to me at all. But, it's worked out fine for me thus far. Maybe not as fine as it might have done if I had spent the last 20 years schmoozing and going to those parties. I maybe have had a bigger career. But all I wanted to do, anyway, was not to have a career. It didn't really bother me. I wanted to write the books I wanted to write. That's all. I actually think most writers are like that. I mean, I think they are fundamentally solitary. It's just you just want to get something out, and you want to give a version of the world that you think is true. That's all. And so, yeah.
You joined as well that sort of tradition of a writer in exile. So you mentioned Hemingway, but I can think of a number of writers that clustered in Morocco. Graham Greene spent a lot of his life overseas.
They all did. They all did in a way. I mean, you think of Patricia Highsmith, you think of her, but she spent her whole life in Switzerland or wherever. I mean, her books are set in Greece and in Tunisia and France and Italy and whatnot, There are certain kinds of writers who like writing about their home territory. I wrote one story set in the UK in my last collection, and it was very satisfying to do it because it was so familiar and so easy on some level. So it's rather a mysterious question as to why I haven't done that more. But it doesn't reflect the way I've lived. I spent all my life outside of my own country. It's funny, because I feel very rooted. I feel very English. Mm-hmm. I know where my ancestors are buried in a small village in called Pycombe in Sussex. They're all there, and I'll probably join them, eventually. So I don't feel rootless, and I don't feel like I don't know where I'm from.
Right, because there are some writers that go to lose themselves or to reinvent themselves.
Yeah, not me, not at all. No, I don't feel that at all. I don't have any grudge against Britain or England. I mean, none at all. I don't have any animus. I'm not living here because I hate it there. Let's face it, a lot of people who live here do feel that way. They're escaping. I don't feel like I'm escaping at all. I mean, I go back to London all the time. And the money I make as a writer is rooted in in London and New York. It's not, and now Hollywood, LA. So I don't feel any resentment about that. I think that would be ridiculous. I just happen to find living here very agreeable for me personally. But I don't have a very social life here. I mean, I spend most of my time alone, and it suits me fine.
You say that most of your books selling in London or New York. There is one book that you do see consistently in the English language bookstores in Thailand, which is, of course, Bangkok Days, which published before you actually came to live here, call this place home, and is an earlier work of non-fiction. How has the city changed since you wrote that book?
I've never reread that book because I know that there are probably a lot of mistakes in it that I don't want to revisit, because it was a book I wrote at a certain time in my life and a certain place and time, and I don't want to go back and revise it and update it and all that. And so I accept, if there are mistakes in that book, I accept the mistakes. I think they're part of the mistakes that I would have made at that time. But I would say, at a guess, it's changed enormously. This is a very rapidly changing city. I don't even recognize it from 10 years ago. I've been here 12 years now. When I first moved here 12 years ago, I mean, even this neighborhood we're in now, Soy 31, is totally different. It's very, it has changed. It's become a lot more expensive, a lot richer, I guess, a lot more cosmopolitan. The food scene has completely changed. The electric cables are still external, still drooping over the streets like liana. But aside from that, it seems the vibe feels very different here now.
I believe the Ballad of the Small Player, which has just been adapted for Netflix, that was related to your earlier time spent in Bangkok as well, right? You were doing visa runs, I think you did.
I used to do visa runs to Macau because I found it was a very cheap, easy place to get away. I had a different visa then than I have now. So then I needed to leave the country every 90 days. And that was a chore. I used to go to Cambodia, blah, blah, you run out of places. So I used to go to Macau. It was just very, very easy. And then I ended up writing a piece for the New Yorker that they didn't publish. But it put me in contact with a lot of the casino heads and with the Stanley Ho's family and all that. So I got a deal to stay at the Lisboa Hotel, which is the old gambling hotel, now completely superseded by the big new ones that have come. But back then, it was like the place to be. And I used to love going there because it was such an extraordinarily weird place. I mean, you could have a room on the 12th floor, and then you could just take the elevator or escalators down to the casino floors, which are open all night. And, and there was a Greyhound betting thing on the ground floor as well, with all the Mongolian girls turning clockwise around there, with the gangsters in their shades all night long. I found that fascinating. And the whole supernatural atmosphere of the place. Those great jade statues of Guan Yin, the goddess of luck, or fertility, sailors and luck. And I just found that sort of so unlike Vegas, which I knew very well. I know Vegas very well. I found this very new to me. And I started, on my visa runs, I would spend more and more time. Like if I had to go for a week or something, or 3 days, I'd end up spending a month. And it was so cheap then. It was cheaper than Bangkok. I mean...
So, I know Macau quite well because I was a China-based writer. I'd go down to Macau or Hong Kong periodically, but it never struck me as a place to write a novel. I'm not sure there's been many Macau novels. I mean...
Well,
why did that inspire you to sort of...
It didn't. I didn't go there to write a novel, and I wasn't going there to do research for a novel. In fact, I wasn't writing fiction at that time. I was just hanging out because I thought it was amusing or interesting, strange.
Did you gamble as well?
Yeah, but there's no gambling involved because Baccarat Punto Blanco is not a game of skill. It's a game purely of chance. It's an I Ching game, which is why the Chinese are attracted to it. Mm-hmm. It's a sort of therapy where you just go along with the flow of luck. This is why they have these vertical boards by each table, which show the direction of the I Ching. If that's what it is, I think that's what it is. So you have crowds come around the tables to see where the winds of fortune are blowing. They're not gathering around the tables to see who's a skillful player. It's something more supernatural. So the supernatural element was very suggestive to me, but, I didn't have any intention of writing the book. I wrote the book here in Bangkok years later, actually. Mm-hmm. And that book didn't begin as a gambling book. It began as I had done a trip through rural China years earlier. Actually, I ended up in Kham, which is a Tibetan part of China, in Sichuan. And we got stuck in a snowstorm and had to stop by a monastery for the night. And we stopped and asked the monks if we could stay, and they let us stay there. And it was like a remote village with about 10 houses in this very wild, wild, remote part of Sichuan. And I remember saying to one of the monks, there are no young girls in this village. And he said, accurate, because they all leave to go make their fortune in China, or Hong Kong, Macau, actually. And the strange thing is, many of them never come back, and we never know what happened to them. And I thought that was such a haunting premise for a story, that book actually began as the story of the Chinese migrant, not the story of the gambler. In the first drafts that I wrote, it was Dao Ming's story, not Lord Doyle's story. But as I tried to do that story, I realized that I'm not Chinese, and I'm not a Chinese girl, for one thing, and that I couldn't really impersonate the voice because it was written in third person. I thought, no, I can't do this. I have to do the first person voice has to be the Anglo-Irish guy. It has to be close to me. It has to be my personality, not hers.
And how much of Lord Doyle is you, and how much?
A lot. It's quite a
brave admission, isn't it?
It's quite an autobiographical book in some ways, although, of course, the film is a bit more extreme. But, I did used to like wearing the cheap velvet jacket I got made in the basement from some Chinese tailor, just because it was such a funny feeling to descend to the casino floor at midnight in a green velvet jacket. And I noticed that they brought this over from the book. I've forgotten about it. But, Colin Farrell was wearing that green velvet jacket throughout the film. And I thought at one point during the shooting, he came over to me and said, it's you, isn't it? And I thought, should I say yes or no? But it clearly was. And it's funny, when I went to the gala, there was a gala opening of that movie at the Royal Festival Hall in London, which is a big media occasion, 2,000 people, whatever the capacity of that place is. And I sat there, I had not seen the film up to that point because Netflix didn't give me the link. So I sat there in the audience and watched it, and I didn't know at all what to expect. But halfway through the film, I thought, it's funny, isn't it, that this is my world, actually, and yet nobody knows who I am in this audience. I'm the anonymous person,
The anonymous writer.
The anonymous writer who,
looking at Colin Farrell,
of course. No one cares about writers anymore,
So what was the chain of events that led from? Because it's quite a strange novel, even by your own standards.
It is.
And what was the chain of events that led from it being a book? Because it's a big budget production as well, with stars.
$50 million. Yeah. Wow. So basically, I was on the jury for the Macau Film Festival in 2017 with Joan Chen, actually the great Chinese movie star from Bertolucci days. We were on this jury, looking at all these movies. The chairman, the guy who was responsible for the festival was Mike Goodrich, who's a now top-level producer in London. And Mike and I became, obviously, it's just 6 people, so we became friendly with all of us, with each other. And I said to him, I got this book set in Macau, why don't you read it? And he was very intrigued, and he read it, and he said, maybe we can do something with this. That was 8 years ago, So this was a very long journey, And the development took a long time. I actually had the Zoom meetings with Edward Berger pretty soon after that. But then Berger went off and made All Quiet on the Western Front, and then he made Conclave. So, his career exploded, and this, held everything up for a long time. And then we had to wait for Colin Farrell to come available, because he was the perfect guy to do that. And I knew both Berger and Farrell wanted to work on the book, And then we had to get a script. Roman Joff had to write the script. It's a very long process, And then
was it difficult to sort of let go of the reins of it?
Complete? No, not at all. I had no involvement. I can't take the glory or the blame. I mean, the film is their film, and It's Edward's film. I think Edward's a very, very talented director, obviously. I was intrigued to see what he would do with that and what he would make of it, because ultimately it's a ghost story. I feel in the film's reception that Asian audiences instinctively understood that it was a supernatural story and a ghost story. And American critics, American viewers, British, they didn't get that at all.
Right, so I read some of the reviews and they seem to miss that.
Completely miss it.
When I watched the film, it seemed to emphasize it more than it was even emphasized.
Absolutely.
In the
I mean, there's a moment where Dao Ming, played by Fala Chen, walks down a corridor. He calls out to her, and she doesn't hear him. And she turns a corner, and the first thing, if you live in Asia, the first thing you think is, ghost, she's dead. It's a ghost. But of course, Americans are like, what's that? What does it mean? Why isn't it explained? But proof that film criticism is dead in our country. It's just dead. It's gone.
What about the sense of place? So not just in The Ballad of the Small Player, but in most of your novels, you'll spend long paragraphs, pages even, describing the weather, describing the landscape. And, if you take like an MFA in creative writing in the US these days, they'll say literature's character-driven, get straight to the action, don't waste your time with this purple prose about how hot it was or what the mountains looked like. Why do you sort of defy that conventional wisdom in your writing?
Because I think it's potboiler advice. I mean, it's an advice for writing bad novels. Look at what comes out the other end. If you're reading a really good thriller writer like Donald Westlake or, Dashiell Hammett or something, okay, yeah. It's not true of Raymond Chandler, though, because Chandler actually does spend a lot of time with the urban landscape of Los Angeles and Mexico and whatnot. I think place is what drives human beings. It's not a literary opinion. It's not a literary idea on my part. I actually think human beings in general are created by place, not the other way around. This seems intuitively pretty obvious if you think about yourself. You ask me what is it that draws me to living in Bangkok? It's a sense of place. Place changes your character, changes everything.
You go to great lengths to commit to accuracy. So there's a scene in Ballad of the Small Player in the book where Lord Doyle goes to Llama Island.
Yep.
And he walks down the street, and I remember reading those sentences, and you describe a temple and a basketball court, and I walked down that street and seen that temple and that basketball court. Why do you not just imagine the environment?
No. Yes, authenticity is really important when it comes to these things. In fact, after I wrote that book and I was editing it, and I thought to myself, is it true that when character A goes from A to B, that it takes 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 50 seconds. And I found that everything in my draft was wrong. The whole book was wrong. Everything was wrong. So I took a stopwatch. It sounds ridiculous, but I took a stopwatch and I went through all the moments where a character walks from this place to even if it's from a lobby of a hotel to an elevator. Right. I timed it. And then I found that I had to rewrite the whole book because everything was wrong. And another interesting thing was when I went back to do that with my stopwatch, I looked down on the sidewalks in Macau and I noticed that there were these monochrome mosaics, set into the sidewalk with these zodiacal signs and mystical symbols. And I thought, how weird, I didn't notice that. I never noticed that. And yet it's such a characteristic thing. And maybe it becomes suggestive when you look down at the sidewalk and you see these signs. And so I wrote that in the fourth draft. I wrote that in. I think it's very important to do that. It's like, in a novel when a character looks up at the night sky and they're in the northern hemisphere and they get the constellation wrong. Mm-hmm. That to me is like unforgivable. Well, I mean, we all do it, obviously, But I mean,
I have a mental image of you running around Macau with the
stopwatch. Well, I did that in Cambodia for Hunters in the Dark when I realized that my characters were walking around Phnom Penh. And I realized that when I was going around Phnom Penh while writing the book, I was going around on a motorbike. So I didn't, then I'd have a character do a walk, and the time was off. So I did that as well with Hunters in the Dark. And funnily enough, it kind of tightened the plot. It tightened the structure because you get space-time correct. And I think all novelists, if I was to give an advice to any novelist, I would say pay attention to detail because details determine bigger things.
Right. So Hunters in the Dark is maybe my favorite novel of yours. And like most of your novels, it sort of concerns the expat experience or a foreigner overseas. Why do you, apart from the obvious thing that you've been a foreigner overseas, why do you think that's an interesting topic to cover in your fiction?
because it's sort of reverse immigration. I mean, we have like this whole literature about immigrants coming to the West and describing their experiences. But then when we do it the other way around, it's always like under the aegis of this absurd word expat. It's like, so, but that's not what's going on, is it? What's actually going on is musical chairs. I mean, people are moving around the world in this way in order to displace themselves, because they want to be displaced, because they want to get some essential part of themselves. It's not escapism, because escapism is a dated idea that can't work anymore. You can't escape anywhere. Back in the days, guys would, fake their own deaths and go to the Philippines and get a death certificate and escape and get the insurance money.
Right.
It's a great idea. And in fact, I wrote a story about that once, about Byron Bales, the detective who, and I actually went to Manila and got myself a death certificate just for the hell of it, because I needed to for the story. And I have it above my desk today.
Oh, great.
It's like my own death certificate. But I don't think you can do it anymore. Everything is digital, and you can't. So I think it's something else. There's a kind of unhappiness at the root of the human condition that we don't want to, that we don't necessarily want to be sitting in an English village, going to the pub every evening. I noticed this in the young, in the people who are much younger than me. There's a kind of dissatisfaction with, so whether it's illusory or not, I think when you do that, look at it from the point of view of a storyteller, you're looking at characters who are, spun out of control by the fact that they can't rely on their normal props and their normal support system, and they spin out of control. But they also, you might say, they spin closer to their real center of gravity, and I think that's quite an interesting. I mean, I'm not the only or the first to do it. I mean, I would argue that Highsmith's characters are all like that as well. Think about Ripley when he goes, this like guy who's never been outside of New York, flies to the Italian Riviera. He has no idea where he is. And does this make him more ruthless and cruel? Yes. Yeah, that's the whole point of that story. It does.
Do you think that sort of melancholy or that sadness that you talk about at the root of the human condition, that's quite an English thing as well, though, isn't it?
English are melancholy people. And also, I would say the English are, I've had my DNA done. It's almost entirely Scandinavian Viking. So I think there's this seafaring, wandering gene we have, and look at our history. I mean, everyone talks about the British Empire and colonialism, blah, blah, blah. I mean, actually what it is, when you look at the early settlement of the Americas, it's just these people who are just wandering. They just want to find somewhere else. It's much more mysterious than we think. I'm much sadder, much more melancholy than,
And you're part Irish as well, and the Irish...
I'm half Irish, yeah.
Have sort of travelled the world as well.
Do you remember in the Kubrick movie, Barry Lyndon, where, Barry shows up at the HQ of the Prussian army, and there's an old guy with an eye patch, and they're doing a one-on-one. And halfway through their conversation, the old guy realizes, because they're speaking German, and he realizes that he's not German, he's Irish. And he starts crying, and he says, my boy, they break out into English. And he says, I'm also a wandering Irishman. We're sort of like wandering Jews. He doesn't say that in the movie, but I think the Irish are, it's like Joyce, one of my early heroes, and still, but who was more wandering than Joyce? I mean, Joyce became a school teacher in Pula near Trieste at a time in the First World War, and it was just nowhere. I mean, you're really on the outer fringes of Europe. And of course, that's the secret to Ulysses. Yeah.
Right. So, you've set all these novels and non-fiction works in different parts of the world. The Forgiven was also made into a film in 2021. That's your novel that's set in North Africa?
In Morocco, yeah.
In Morocco. Are there any more film adaptations in the pipe?
Well, we've just formed our own production company called Java Road, based in London here and to some extent in Tokyo. And we are in the process of doing exactly that. So I think Beautiful Animals, which is my novel set in Greece, I'm not allowed to say who's attached, but we have director attached and almost screenwriter. Not me, I'm not going to write the thing. And I think that will be filmed in Greece, in Hydra in Greece. I don't know when, 27 maybe.
And this is all with Java Road?
Yes, yeah. The idea of the company was to sort of, because I've had varying various stories with people who've optioned my stuff and paid a lot of money to do it, but haven't actually made it, especially in Hollywood, where you feel that often the people are too remote from the material. They don't really understand it. If the material is American, they understand it, but not, if it's global, no, they don't. And so I thought the best thing would be to take control of the IP, take a horrible word to use for one's own work, but, to take control of the narratives involved and then develop it ourselves. So
what about, I just checked my notes, but The Glass Kingdom was published in 2022?
I can't remember. 20, I think, yeah.
Right. And that's set in Bangkok, right?
Yes.
Will that be adapted for
That's a very difficult one because it's so local to Thailand that it was optioned by Apple for 3 years. And they tried to, they hired various expensive writers, none of whom had been to Bangkok, of course. And so the scripts just weren't very good, I don't think. And in the end, Apple said to me, what about if we just move it to Korea? Is that okay with you? And at that point, I just thought, okay, I give up. I'm not going to do this. I'll develop that myself. But doing a horror film, it's a horror story, really. Doing a horror film in Bangkok represents its own challenges because, the Thai film industry is the way it is. There's a talent here to do it. There's a lot of talent in Thailand, actually, in the film world. The crews technically are very, very good. The actors can also be very good, but most of them work in TV. If you've watched Thai TV, you see the style that's involved in that. And the writers, are not used to writing in English for this kind of film. So we'd have to we'd have to put the strings on the beads on the string with that one. And I think we definitely want to do it, but it will take some time. It'll take some thought,
Right. So just to let people know who haven't read it, it's about an American called Sarah that arrives.
It's about 4 girls living in an apartment block. It's not typical of the kind of stories that you see in Bangkok. Yeah. There's no bar girls, there's no underworld drugs, none of that. It's just about 4 girls living in an apartment block during some political upheavals. But essentially, it's a horror story set in an apartment block. You can see it's a much more claustrophobic kind of story, so it's of less interest to outsiders. So we have to make it interesting to outsiders. That's the challenge. Yeah.
Right, but the Thai cinema, at least the horror films, are having a bit of a moment.
Yes, they are. And I know a lot of the people who are involved in those films actually are friends of mine. And so, it'll take a little, another 6 months, I think, and then we'll probably we'll pull that one together. But you're right. Thai film is really on the up and up. I'm very glad to say, and I hope that I can contribute to that actually and give them some help.
I saw on your social media feed that you have another novel coming out next year, Children of Wolves.
Yeah.
Do you want to give our readers and listeners and viewers a quick preview of what that's going to be about? It's about 4 American students in Istanbul who decide to assassinate the American consul. So it's a very political book. Been writing it for the last 2 or 3 years. Very hard to get it right. I think we got it right now. And I think we might have a movie deal on it as well at the same time, even though it isn't published yet. So we'll see how that goes. In a way, a sort of new step for me in a slightly different direction, a more political direction. Against political fiction in general, usually, but I find myself kind of drawn to it. I followed the Luigi Mangione case in New York, which is very interesting to me because this upper-class kid was going to rave parties all over the world. It wasn't what you think. And the ideology behind him isn't clear. I think we're finding it's something new. It's a generational thing. I think we don't understand necessarily the radicalization of people in their mid-20s. I'm not sure I understand it. I tried to understand it. I did a lot of reading for it. So we'll see how that turns out. You've had this, $50 million Netflix production of your novel. Don't you feel like you want some deck chair time in the sun, or are you still really driven by your writing and your curiosity?
Well, I was never driven by that in the first place. I was broke when I came here, seriously. I mean, I had nothing at all. I had enough money for rent, that was it. And nothing has changed. I'm still in the same room with the same computer, with this, it's like nothing has really changed. My financial fortunes have changed, but it's for my grandkids mainly. I don't own anything. I don't own a house. I don't own a car. I don't own anything. I literally don't. I don't own stocks.
You have
nothing.
A scooter, don't you?
I do have a Filano Yamaha, which I've owned for like 5 years, and that's it.
And that's how you get around the city?
Okay, I do have expensive suits from Savile Row. That's true. And you know what? I never wear them.
You've indulged a few luxuries.
I'm interested in clothes in general because clothes, the way people dress is very interesting to me. But that's as a novelist with the way you look at people, because the way you dress says something about you. And it always does, whether you like it or not, for better or worse. And so, I became interested in clothes, how clothes are made, where they're made, who wears them. That's all it's kind of interesting to me, just as a side note. And I went through a period of spending a lot of money on these things, and then I find I don't wear them here in Bangkok. I wear them when I'm in Tokyo,
Wouldn't it be too hot in Bangkok?
Yeah, too hot, exactly. I mean, I had to give an address at the Oxbridge annual event at the Intercontinental a few weeks ago, the Oxford-Cambridge Club. And I had to put on my Edward Sexton black velvet suit with a bow tie. And it took me all day to figure out how to do the bow tie. And I realized that I just don't know how to tie a bow tie. So I went through the whole thing with hundreds of people watching me, with this ridiculous butterfly that was badly tied, And I knew what they were thinking, this guy doesn't know how to tie a bow tie. And then I thought, well, it's just once a year,
You don't have your Lord Doyle suit anymore.
I have the Lord Doyle. I have that. Well, velvet is a wonderful material for suits. So we should every gentleman should have a velvet suit or a velvet jacket at least,
As we live in the age of social media, where can fans of Lawrence Osborne find you online?
I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, all these dreary things. I don't really do much. I don't really do much on them. I certainly don't use them to advocate political opinions. I think that's ridiculous. I do it for sort of personal reasons, to stay in touch with people, and also to showcase movies or books or whatnot, or for that matter, podcasts. For that, I think it's useful, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wrap things up with a quick fire round.
Oh no, it's always the worst.
It's a timeout tradition, so I don't want you to think too much about these questions. Just whatever pops into your head, just fire off the answers, okay? Number 1. In Bangkok days, you wrote about eating bugs and other forms of exotic street food. If somebody is coming to Bangkok for the first time today, what should they eat and where?
Not bugs, and not any of the places that I mentioned in that book. I have some recommends. You can DM me.
Okay. No particular restaurant that's at the moment?
My favorite restaurant right now for Thai food is, like I mentioned, is Phuket, which is a place in Chinatown. And I think that's the best, outside of really expensive places like Potong. But I think affordable, brilliant food, I think Phuket is the place I like now.
And that's in Yaowarat?
Yeah, more or less, yes.
And how do you spell?
It's Phuket spelled with a J instead of a T, yeah.
Okay.
Don't ask me why, I don't know.
Obviously, you'd like people to read your books or watch the film adaptations of them, but for an established Lawrence Osborne fan, which other authors or filmmakers would you recommend?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I love Korean film right now. So apart from Bong and Park, I love Im Sang-soo, the Korean director who made The Housemaid, The President's Last Buck, and The Old Garden. Those 3 films. Go watch those. If you want to understand contemporary Korean film, that would be somebody that is not touted in the mainstream Western media.
You're quite unusual in sort of liking cinema, because a lot of authors they just like
they hate it. Yeah, they don't like cinema at all. I find cinema is a way of telling narrative. And so if you're involved in writing narrative, why would you not be interested in other forms of narrative? I mean, they're very closely related. They're very different, obviously. Films are not books, but I think I'm always interested in how filmmakers tell their stories. There's a lot to be learned from it, actually. And so, yeah.
And is it just Korean cinema? Or?
No, of course not. I mean, cinema all over, but Korean films I've been following Korean film for a long time, long before Parasite and all these films that have been successful, Taxi Driver and all these films that became successful in the West. I've been following Korean film since the turn of the century, actually, when I was just thinking the intensity, the brilliant scripts, the lack of wokeness, if you like. I mean, those films are raw and brutal, and sometimes that's what you want.
Okay, number 3 in the quickfire round. So there's a kind of a Lawrence Osborne trope in your storytelling, which is often somebody fleeing across a border or arriving in a foreign land with a bag full of money or suitcase full of ill-gotten gains. If you were to disappear across an international border, what 3 items would you take with you?
I think about this all the time. I thought about it during the earthquake because I was stuck in the earthquake during the whole thing. And after the earthquake, everyone was like, you should have what do they call it? Like a carry bag, like the passport, a wallet, and your phone, and just split. just leave with those things. And I think it would be the same, I guess. I'd say, I was about to say a little piece of gold, because, you can't sell Thai gold in other countries because it's not at the purity level. So unfortunately, but if I was not starting from Thailand, I would say a bar of gold, yeah. Although you can get arrested for having that. So the central things now are phone, wallet, credit cards. A very boring list, actually, and passport.
No luxury item, no Savile Row suit?
I'd wear the Savile Row suit and then carry the bag.
Okay.
But which suit? That would be a hard choice.
Obviously, we're very grateful and happy that you live here in Bangkok. But if you were fleeing across the border, is there a city in the world that you sometimes fantasize that you would have?
Well, my son is married to a Japanese woman, and I have my granddaughters who are very little tiny babies, Japanese. So I am actually technically a Japanese grandfather. Giri no otosan. So I think it would have to be Tokyo, really, because that's where I kind of live. That's my second city after Bangkok. And my son is moving there in a couple of months, so the family will be there. So yeah, and also I love Tokyo anyway, like most people, I suppose. Nothing very original about that. But Tokyo is a city where I could live very happily if I didn't have to live here.
But you've never set a novel there?
No, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Not yet. There's time. There's a little bit of time left, but not much. But
okay, last question in the quickfire round. Perhaps a lot of people don't know that you've actually written books about drinking alcohol, The Accidental Connoisseur and The Wet and the Dry.
Yeah.
What is Lawrence Osborne's tipple of choice, and can you get it anywhere in Bangkok?
I don't drink much these days. I really had to stop. I mean, on the advice of many doctors. And when I do drink now, I'm not drinking Negronis, which you can get everywhere. I drink wine. I still drink wine at a high level. And I think actually you can find great wine in Bangkok now. It's not, so let's say I wanted to drink a bottle of Lopez de Heredia, Spanish wine, which is a red one I love. And the specific wine is Tondonia. Funnily enough, one place you can drink there is Joel, which is this Indian restaurant, Soy 18, who is run by a really smart guy, young guy, who has a great cellar. And you can go drink that wine. Does that go with Indian food? Matter of opinion, but you could certainly go in there and just drink the wine.
The name of the restaurant is?
Johl. Joel.
Joel.
Yeah.
Joel. Okay, you heard it here first.
Bangkok foodies will know that place.
Yeah, if you want top wine.
Tondonia Lopez de Heredia, one of the great Riojas, maybe the greatest of all Riojas, the greatest of all traditional Riojas, not the modern crap, the traditional ones. Yeah, there are other places you can drink that actually, but that's where I would drink it.
Okay, Lawrence, congratulations on the Netflix film adaptation.
Thank you very much.
We're looking forward to more film adaptations and, of course, more books.
God help you all.
And yeah, thanks for chatting with us here at Time Out. Thank you.